Did I ever tell you guys about the time that I crashed my dad's car after he sold it? Let's do a little story time today. It is windy out. Holy crap. So I didn't want to do just another boring putting an engine together partially video. So I figured this time we'll spice things up with a little bit of story time. So this is the story all about how my dad's car got turned upside down. I'd like to take a moment, just sit right down. I need to get a socket to get these plugs out. I'm still going back and forth on what heads I want to use on the RX-7. Anyway, so back to the totaling my dad's car story. We should probably do a little bit of backstory. So back in the day, we used to buy and sell a lot of cars. Like, he was scrapping pretty much full time. So this was like when scrap was, golly, I don't remember, like 300 a ton or 350 a ton maybe. And I think the statute of limitations is probably good on this now, but he used to have a deal with a scrapyard, I'm not going to say which scrapyard, to where even if the cars didn't have a title, they would still take it just because they knew he was legit about it. He was actually buying these cars from people, and US just wanted as much scrap as they could get. So he was making probably like $3,000 a week just scrapping. All we would do, occasionally I'd go out and help him, is we would just go out and drive around every back road that we could find within like a 40-50 mile radius of our town and just look for scrap cars or just scrap in general. It didn't have to be cars, but most of what we did was car related. And it was cool. I actually missed that a lot. It was a lot of fun. We'll probably never experience that again, to be honest. But yeah, we would just spend the whole day driving around, looking out in fields and stuff, and when we'd find something, we'd go up and we'd knock on the door and ask them about it. A lot of times they wouldn't be there, so we'd just have like a sticky notepad that we'd just write our number down and be like, hey, saw the car, whatever, call us back at this number. So that's what we would do most of the time. Like I said, I went out with them a good bit. I was still in school at the time, so that's how we got a ton of cars. I think there was one year that we sold, or I guess more accurately, he sold like 150 cars out of the front yard, something like that. It was some crazy amount. It was over 100, I remember that. Anyway, so that's how we would get a bunch of these cars. And that's how, like at this point I've had, I don't know, probably close to 40 cars that I consider my personal cars. I don't know if you guys can hear me at all. So yeah, that's how we got a lot of cool cars. There was this one guy that we called Junkyard Rob, because basically he lived on 50, 60 acres with his brother. I don't remember his brother's name. But they were just some, I don't want to call them weird, but they were very interesting people. And they had a, well, I think it was their dad initially started pretty much a junkyard, but it wasn't like an actual junkyard. They just had a ton of cars out in their woods. And I don't know how my dad and the guy he was working with at the time stumbled across it. They were probably just out driving or whatever and saw some cars in the trees and stopped and asked about them. This was like when scrap was at its peak. Like they were making $3,000+ a week each. And they struck a deal with them to scrap like pretty much every car that the dude had. And he had some sick cars. Like there's still Datsun Z out there. There's Bradley kit car, which not sick car, but just an interesting car. Some old Broncos. There was a bunch of stuff, including my 1967 Mercury Comet Caliente that I had for I don't know how long, which I really missed that car. That came from their place, but they struck a deal to scrap pretty much every car there, and that didn't happen because these dudes were they would have a complete junk piece of crap car that needed to get scrapped, and they'd be like, no, don't scrap that one, because there's this one little trim piece that I want to pull off it. And my dad would be like, all right, just pull it off so we can scrap the car and get back to business. Like, these prices aren't going to stay up forever. We need to, like, get on it. And what my dad and Mike, the guy he was working with, actually ended up doing was renting a boom lift so that they could reach some of these cars. So it's like, if you haven't seen a boom lift, imagine like an extendo arm forklift, but for off-road. So they could like reach out, I don't remember what it was, like 20, 30 feet, and grab these cars and just pick them up and carry them to the trailer. And they would have them stacked like 3 high on the trailer and go to the junkyard. And like they each had, my dad and the Mike guy he was working with, each had a truck and trailer, so they would haul 6 cars at a time and just back and forth all day. And one of those cars that he had was Buick Regal, sedan, something. So with these heads, it would be 10.55 to 1. And with the 243s, it would be 10.21 to 1. I don't know if those 0.3 points are worth me worrying about, since the 243s flow that much better. So I think I'm still going to put these on the Fiero engine and the 243s on James Brown. These will help boost the compression in the Fiero motor, and the RX-7's engine will flow a little bit better. I think that's what we're going to do. So anyway, my dad had this Buick, and I don't remember what I was driving at the time. I think I had my 62 Ford Galaxy. I don't know what else it would have been. I'm pretty sure it was the Galaxy. And it was winter, you know, as winter happens. And I was over visiting my then girlfriend, now wife. The Galaxy, I didn't want to drive in the snow a bunch. It didn't have the best heater, didn't have the best traction, and I just didn't want a bunch of salt on it, because, you know, Michigan. So I was like, hey, yo, Pa, can I take that Buick? And he was like, yeah, son, you sure can, because I know you're responsible and would never do anything stupid. And I said, word up, dog. And he tossed me the keys, and he said, I owe you a 10-second car. And I said, this ain't it, fam. And we parted ways, never to see each other again. So I took the car, went over, visited Jess, did some stuff and things that we can't talk about on a family program, because, you know, none of that's true. But after we were done hanging out, I hopped in the car and I was like, all right, Jess, I'll see you later, bye. And I got in the car and I was like, yeah, that was awesome. I had a lot of fun. Gee willikers. And I'm driving home, just bricked up out of my mind. Can't wait to just get home and, you know, sort the mail. And did I mention it's winter? And I had only been driving like 6 months at the time. And I remember in driver's ed class, they were like, 1 out of every like 5 of you is gonna crash in the first 6 months. And I was like, nah, not this guy. But little did I know, I would live to become a statistic. So I'm driving home, going slightly elevated from the speed limit, and all of a sudden there's a patch of black ice, sorry. And all of a sudden the car goes from this to this, and then it goes from this to this, and then it goes from this to this. So what happened was the car starts to skate around, and I'm like 16, 17 at the time. I think I was 17 at the time. And car starts to move around, hitting just ice after ice after ice, and I'm doing great. It's like I'm drifting down that mountain in Initial D. I'm just doing sick flips, dude, kick flip, going crazy. And then all of a sudden the car just like hooks, goes right into the trees. And when I say right into the trees, I mean, like, here's the road. I'm skating around, go into the ditch, through the ditch, into the trees, and then the car flips over at least once. I don't know how many times it actually flipped over, but it flipped over at least once. So when the car goes off-road, it goes like this, flips over onto the trees, and it's up in the air. So I get out of the car. Well, I couldn't open the door, but the windows were broke. So I climb out the window and like kind of fall down because I'm up in the air. And I'm like, ah, shit. That's not good. I'm looking around, and I live in the country, right? So I think the closest house was probably half-mile away. But I had my cellular telephone on me, as one does when you're a millennial. My first thought is not to call 911 because the car wasn't legal. It's not insured, nothing. So my first thought's not to call 911. That's a bad idea. My first thought's not to call my dad. My first thought's not to call my mom and tell her what happened. My first thought was to take my phone out and send Jess a text saying, hey, ... I crashed the car. And I didn't know how bad it was at the time, but the car was totaled. Which, I mean, all things considered, it was somewhat of a gentle crash. Like, the worst thing that happened to me was getting all sliced up by the broken glass climbing out of the car. But yeah, the car like hit trees, rolled over, and then just kind of like landed on a bunch of trees and kind of crushed them over. So it was like as far as like crashing and totaling your car and rolling it goes, it's pretty gentle. But if there was like one just fucking elm there that I'd have just, you know, I was a pretty good kid, so I'd have gone to heaven at the time. Right now, very debatable. So after that, I did end up calling my dad, which it was like 2 in the morning at the time, and I was like, hey, yo, Pops, what's good, homie? Listen, so you don't need this car, right? And he's like, what the fuck did you do? And I was like, yeah, so I kind of crashed your car. Like, I wrecked your shit, dude. And he's like, all right, fuck, let me get up, let me get dressed, I'll be there in a minute. He rolls up with the trailer, and Jess had shown up at this time with her dad. And my dad pulls up with the trailer, and he hooks the winch to it and fucking drags it and yoinks it out of the ditch and the trees and stuff. And I'm just kind of like hanging out, because, I mean, winching a car in that situation is a one-man job. Like, there's nothing I could have really done. So I'm just like letting my dad handle it. But I remember Jess later on had told me that her dad was like, why isn't Josh helping? What the fuck? and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, hook a winch to car, go hit the button. And then to make a bad situation worse, where I decided would be a good spot to wreck the car, there's a long straight road, the one that I crashed on, and then probably a mile and a half down the road, there's like a huge cornfield here. So you can see the road that intersects it, and you can see headlights driving, and then they go slow, and then they keep driving, and then they turn around and come back towards us, and they make it 100 feet from us, and then whoop whoop, and I'm like, aw, fuck, dude, this no good. So yeah, cops showed up. I don't know if one of the houses saw everything that was happening and called them, or if it was just that good old-fashioned luck that he just happened to be in the area, or what. But cops showed up and was like, hey, everything okay? And this is the moment that I knew my dad was ride or die. He immediately walks up to the cop and he's like, yeah, I just hit some fucking ice and just lost control, and man, but I'm getting it taken care of. No worries, officer. And the cop's like, yeah, huh? You lost control? As I'm just sitting off in the corner. The moon's out. So the cop could have easily given him a ticket for like reckless driving or something, but he didn't, luckily. And we got the car loaded up, and I'm like, all right, Jess, I'll see you tomorrow, maybe. I hop in the truck with my dad, and we're going back home. He's pretty quiet. A few minutes later, he's like, you know, I sold this car yesterday. The guy's supposed to come pick it up tomorrow. He already paid me the money. And I was like, shit. Why'd you let me drive it, dude? Like, why didn't you tell me to take the truck or something, man? So looking back, that was fairly amusing. But yeah, that is thankfully the only time I have totaled, one, any car, and two, a car that my dad had already sold. I thought that would be a pretty fun story. One that, looking back, it's been about a decade, so I'm okay to laugh at it and share that pretty embarrassing story, to be honest. So there are other stories that I think would make for a pretty fun video, little story time. So if you want some more story time, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to do this, because wintertime in Michigan and not being able to get very many parts, real hard to... Shut the fuck up, wind! Jesus! Real hard to come up with videos. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for subscribing and clicking that bell. I'll see you next time. I can't reach the camera.